Have you ever had to deal with a powerful person who simply won't listen to reason? A person so stubborn that any direct argument is bound to fail? When we challenge power head-on, it is often the weaker person who breaks. So, what should we do in such a situation? Tonight, I want to share the story of a man who, more than 2,000 years ago, managed to change a king's mind not once, but twice. He did it without an army or a title. In fact, he was not a great general or a brilliant minister. His name was Yu Meng, and he was the court jester. Our story begins in the ancient Chinese state of Chu, ruled by the powerful King Zhuang. The king had a favorite horse, which he loved more than anything. He had it dressed in the finest silk, housed in a stable as lavish as a palace, and fed a diet of dried dates and premium meat. But this life of luxury made the horse obese, and one day, it simply died. The king was overcome with grief. He issued a royal decree to his ministers. "My most beloved companion has passed. You will arrange a funeral for him with the full rites, in honors of a high minister." The court was in shock. A state funeral for an animal? It was absurd. The kingdom would become a laughingstock. Several brave ministers tried to reason with the king, but he flew into a rage, shouting, "Anyone who mentions this matter again will be executed." A heavy, fearful silence fell over the palace. It was then that Yu Meng, the jester, ran into the courtyard, looked up at the sky, and began to cry at the top of his lungs. The king was startled and asked him why he was wailing so loudly. Wiping away his tears, Yu Meng exclaimed, "Your Majesty, a mere minister's funeral? How could that possibly be enough? For such a magnificent horse, in a great state like Chu, such a ceremony is far too humble. You must bury him with the rites reserved for a king. We must build a coffin of pure jade, summon envoys from the neighboring states to mourn, and mobilize the entire populace to build him a grand tomb. If you do this, Your Majesty, your fame will spread across the land, and everyone will say, 'The king of Chu values his horses more than he values his people.'" Hearing this exaggerated satire, the king's face turned crimson. Yu Meng's words were like a mirror, showing him the true absurdity of his own actions. The king began to laugh, finally realizing his foolishness. "My error is great," he said. "Your words are wise. Take the horse to the royal kitchen, and let its meat be shared among the court." And just like that, by proposing an even greater absurdity, Yu Meng guided the king back to reason. But Yu Meng's wisdom did not end there. At that time, the prime minister of Chu was a man named Sun Chuao, famous for his integrity and selfless service. He worked his entire life for the state, but never accumulated any personal wealth. When he was on his deathbed, he gave his son one piece of advice: "After I die, you will surely face poverty. When that happens, go and find Lord Yu Meng, and tell him you are my son." Years later, the prediction came true. The son was so poor he had to sell firewood just to survive. Remembering his father's words, he sought out Yu Meng. Hearing the story, Yu Meng took the young man in and then made a plan. For an entire year, he secretly studied the late prime minister. He wore his old clothes, practiced his walk, his manner of speaking, and even the slightest of his facial expressions. Finally, at a royal banquet, Yu Meng appeared, perfectly disguised as the deceased Sun Chuao. The king, thinking his most loyal minister had returned from the dead, was overjoyed and rushed to greet him. After the shock subsided, the king, deeply moved by Yu Meng's tribute, offered to make him the new prime minister. But Yu Meng, speaking in the voice of Sun Chuao, replied, "Your Majesty, allow me 3 days to discuss this with my wife." 3 days later, he returned and said, "My wife advised me against it. She said, 'Do not become the prime minister of Chu.' A man as loyal as Sun Chuao served the kingdom his entire life, yet today his son lives in poverty, selling firewood to eat. It would be better to end your own life than to meet such a fate." Hearing these words, the king felt a deep and profound sense of shame for his negligence. He immediately summoned Sun Chuao's son, granted him a fief of 400 households, and ensured that the legacy of his most loyal servant would be honored for generations. For the horse's funeral, he used exaggerated satire. For the prime minister's son, he used a heartfelt performance. In both cases, Yu Meng knew exactly how to persuade, not by confrontation, but by moving the heart of his audience. His story offers us a timeless lesson. True persuasion is not about winning an argument with force or logic. True wisdom lies in helping people see their own reflection, to remember the duties they have forgotten, and to correct their own course. This is the story of Yu Meng, the jester, who showed the world that a clever tongue can be stronger than a sword, and true wisdom can be greater than power. Thank you.